Hey, I haven't haven't done a video for a while, and I nuked my channel. So I wanted to do a bit of an unscripted rant about centered around Brandon Sanderson, but I'm going to cover a variety of topics here. Before I get started, though, I did delete all my other videos, and I can't really go into why because if I give too much information, then I risk needing to delete this video as well. Those of you who have been following me for a long time, you know I divulged a lot of like personal information without really worrying about it, and I knew there were some risks associated with that, and they like came back and got me. So I kind of had to stop doing that basically. Um, what have I been up to? So I haven't been writing anything. I I definitely want to get back to it at some point. Um, if I were going to write anything right now, I would probably finish up this romantasy I did. But honestly, like one thing I've learned about myself a lot recently is that I realistically can only focus on about two things at a time. If I ever try to go beyond that, I completely something just disappears. Like it's not like I'll intentionally lose it, but if I try to do three things at once, um, one of those things will just I won't have the motivation for it, and it will fade out. So what I've been working on right now is my day job. I've been going to a lot of like conferences and stuff, and talking to people in meet space about the stuff we've been working on, and I can't talk about that at all here, which is fine. But I've been enjoying my day job a lot, and that helps a good deal with everything. I enjoy it a lot more than full time writing, to be honest with you. And the lifestyle of full time writing just was not conducive to like being happy for me. I guess it just isn't what I would want to do full time. And then I'm also working pretty hard on developing a game, and I'm doing like all the art for it, um, animations, etc. So it's a lot of work, but it's a very fun thing for me. I really enjoy just thinking about that in my free time and just poking at it every day and getting it better. I'm very much planning to like at some point do devlogs of that game where I think I would do that on an existing channel I already have or a new channel. If I do, I will let you know. But I'm kind of at that phase of development right now where I've done a number of sprites for the game, but realistically, I'm focusing on getting the game to be fun. And I have like full ASCII art right now with particle effects. So like there are no actual real graphics other than the particle effects, and the UI doesn't look very good right now. So I'm like every time I think about starting to do devlogs, I tell myself like it probably, especially if I'm trying to have those devlogs kind of, build up a following for the game when it eventually launches. I it just doesn't feel like the right thing to do when my graphics aren't there. But I may reconsider that. We'll see. So getting into Brandon Sanderson, I was just spontaneously motivated to do this because I went into YouTube a few hours ago. I was like working and I was waiting for something to like run. And I just went into YouTube and I don't know what made me do it, but I just typed in Brandon Sanderson sucks into YouTube. And I was like, well, I just wanted to hear somebody like dunking on him, I guess. And there really weren't a lot of good videos about it. And I made me think like, why there should be more. And so maybe I should make one. Um, And I think the reason I've been thinking about this a good bit is I maybe in the summer, I guess, the beginning of the summer, I started listening to Wheel of Time, and I read that entire series back in high school when I think the newest book was like book 6 or 7 or 5 or 6 or 7. I don't remember. So I read through everything that was there, and then it was over. Like I couldn't finish it. I had to wait, you know, a few years for each book to come out, and then inevitably Robert Jordan died, and Brandon Sanderson took over, and I didn't really want to read it anymore after I saw like Jordan died. I didn't even know who Sanderson was, but I just like didn't want to read it. I did eventually read one of the books that Sanderson did, but I never finished the series, and I'm gonna finish it this time. But like, um, I don't remember being viscerally. I didn't have a visceral negative reaction to the Sanderson one, but I did go on to read more of his work later, and I really didn't like it. Excuse me. And I could have given you various reasons about what I didn't like, but it really solidified to me when I started rereading Wheel of Time because that really clicked things into focus for me. So let me, okay. There's one book that my brother recommended I read from Sanderson, which was the Mistborn series, and I read whatever the first book in the mainline non-spin-off series of that was. I don't remember the name of it. And there was a character, I think her name was Vin. All of the names of his characters are very Reddit. It's like, what does a Redditor think is a cool name? I think if you prompted an LLM, like, give me some fantasy names that Redditors would think sound really cool, I think you would get things that sound like Brandon Sanderson characters. Um, I actually want to do that right now. I'll try to do that in the background as I talk, and then if I'm correct, I will uh, sorry, I was not planning to do this, but I really want to do it. So Vin, the book wasn't necessarily like it didn't immediately put me off. Like it wasn't as if I started reading was like, oh, this is garbage. I'm not reading this. But dude, he just the LLM. No, like give me original names. It's just listing like names from other stuff. Anyway, so this book, like, I don't remember. There was a lot of like politics that were happening that I didn't find particularly interesting. It was kind of like there was some kind of underground movement happening that didn't grip me very much. There was the development of the magic system, which is always the Sanderson's thing, and I'll get to that later in detail. Um, but there was a particular scene that really stuck out to me, and actually, not only did it stick out to me, it was after reading this scene, I just put the book down and said, I'm not reading this anymore. Um, so we we had, I don't know, I think it was probably 25% of the book or so as like setting the stage. Vin, I think, was kind of your every man, every woman stand-in character, introducing you to she meets these cool dudes who are doing cool dude stuff, and then you're like, oh, I wish I could be a cool dude. That's kind of what he's intending you to think, right? And then we have a time cut. Like there's a hint that Vin is gonna work with these people, and then we have a jump in time, and it does like kind of like a cold open, like those Breaking Bad cold opens or whatever. So there's like this cold open, and Vin, we're put in like, God, I can't. There's like a Latin word for this. I can't remember it, but we're just put directly into the action. It's like res something. Um, and we don't really know what's going on. It's just like it's as if you were dropped into Vin's head in the middle of some action sequence, right? And she's being pursued by somebody, and she's using her cool. Making use of this amazing magic system that Brandon Sanderson has contrived in order to get away from this pursuer. And if this were a movie or a TV series or an anime, and you open the episode and we see Vin jumping. I think she was on the rooftops. She was like jumping around the rooftops like Spider-Man or whatever. But there were no webs. Instead of webs, she was throwing coins, and you can pull onto any metal or push off metal. So she's throwing coins and pulling on them to like traverse rooftops and stuff. And again, if this were like a visual medium, you would see this happening and you would see this person pursuing her and you wouldn't know who it is. Now, in the book, Sanderson, you can kind of tell like Sanderson had this visual in his head of a movie almost. And then he's like, that is really cool. I'm going to do that. I'm going to write that scene from the movie. But the problem is writing the scene. Sorry, I'm getting recovering from a cold. Writing the scene, you are, even when you're doing like third person in in all of these books, you're it's third person perspective, but you've established that third person perspective gives you the thoughts and knowledge that that person that you're doing the perspective of has. This isn't some kind of like floating camera narrator that doesn't know what people are thinking. We have the thoughts of the character clearly on the page. And so Vin is thinking to herself things like the figure was gaining on me, or I think it was third person, right? The figure was gaining on her. The cloaked shadow, the shadowy cloaked figure. The It was like it was as if he came up with like a registry of terms before he wrote the scene for what he could call this person from Vin's perspective to obfuscate the fact that she actually knows who it is, but he's trying to keep that secret from us, the reader, even though we know everything else that Vin knows. We're selectively being withheld this piece of information simply because he thinks it will be cool when that is revealed later on. Incredibly clumsy. So it would be like the figure, the cloaked. I can't remember any other words he used. I specifically remember the figure, and it's like he probably had to get like a thesaurus out. The silhouette, like the pursuer, the adversary, the opponent. It was like that, right? Like those kind of words. And he was just kind of cycling through them. And I'm reading this thinking to myself, like, this is really awkward prose. There's only one reason he could be doing this, and I think I know what it is. And I knew pretty soon, like, this has to be what he's doing. And without drawing this out too much, like what ends up happening is the cool guy that you were seeing her working with earlier that knows how to do this cool magic system thing. His name was like Kellen or Kevin, or it wasn't Kevin. It was like, um, it was something with a K, I think. I can't quite remember. Maybe it wasn't even a K, but anyway, this belabored scene of the figure, the pursuer, the opponent, the adversary, whatever it was, goes on for like several pages. And it just keeps getting worse. Like every time he recycles one of these words, it gets worse and worse and worse until eventually, like, just as she's getting caught, like, he does something really cool. The shadowy, badass, fedora, trench coated figure does some really awesome, cool thing with a coin or whatever. And then he suddenly says, he looks at Min, and then suddenly he says something, and then we are told that his name, and he's like, you almost had me that time, man, Vin. You should have used the metallurgy pull push combo with the trunk with like whatever the fuck he said, right? But it was like that, like, nice try, kid, like that kind of like stupid cliche tone to it. And then suddenly we realize that, oh, it's the guy that we know from the entire first part of the book. And actually she's not really being pursued, she's not really in any danger. This was just a training exercise. So it's just like the most like I told you, it made me just put the book down, and I was like, I'm not putting myself through this. um but it's this idea of like, okay, there's this like movie aesthetic that I think looks cool, and wouldn't it be cool if I did this kind of stupid cliche thing? And in order to actually write that scene, you have to really imagine, like, I'm imagining this as a writer, like I am a writer. I'm imagining this as a writer. I sit down, I have this idea for, wouldn't it be cool if I did this? I sit down to write it. Like, as a writer, I should be like, oh, wait a minute. This isn't going to work because Vin knows who this guy is. This is not an anime. This is not a movie. I cannot just like I cannot hide from the readers for several pages that Vin doesn't know who this guy is. That would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? Like there's no way I can be in her perspective and not reveal that she knows this is a training exercise, or that she knows who this is. That wouldn't make any sense. So no, I can't do that, even though that would be cool. But also it wouldn't be cool. So like there's like two steps, right? Like the first step is you have to think something that's really stupid and cringe and like juvenile and not suited to the medium is cool. That's the first mistake. And then you have to sit down and actually write this thing, realizing that this is a huge problem. And you can say, oh, well, maybe he didn't realize it. No, he realized it because he was cycling through words like figure, pursuer, opponent. That clunky cycling of words shows you that he realized the problem, and he was like, well, this is such a cool thing, and the reveal is going to be so badass that it's worth doing this. And it's just absolutely awful. So anyway, like, when I was reading Wheel of Time, what I think really struck me as clear here is that Sanderson. So like, Wheel of Time is not perfect. Robert Jordan is not like the greatest master of prose. There's a lot of issues with Wheel of Time. Like I could do a whole video on problems I have with Wheel of Time. But Jordan Jordan is genuinely funny, and he's not trying to be like, I don't want to. It may be inaccurate to say he's not trying to be funny. Like I think he he's like naturally funny, right? He writes a scene. It is often imbued with a degree of humor. Sometimes he over relies on certain running. I like an example of this is this whole thing between the three main male characters. Each one of those characters thinks that he himself has no understanding of how women work. And then he references the other two and says, oh, if only so and so were here. Like Matt will be like, if only Rand were here, he'd know what to do. And then Rand later will be like, if only Matt were here, he would know what to do. And it's done to death in Wheel of Time. Like it's seriously done to death. But like, with that said, there is a level of like humor within the scenes that's not like, it's not like he's setting up this joke that you want to that's delivered and then you expect to receive Reddit gold because your joke is so clever or punny or whatever. Like it's just the scenes happen to have this humor woven into them a lot of the time. And even when he does over rely on these certain devices to get humor across, it's not like, sometimes you just kind of have to roll your eyes. You're like, okay, yeah, like Matt really gets the women. Okay, we got it. Yes, that's very funny, Jordan. Okay. But it's never like, it's never like cringe. It just somehow there's just it just isn't a cringe thing. Like even when he's going way too deep on something, because ultimately like there's like a pleasant feeling to the story. That the humor is it's never it's like it just works with his writing style, and it comes across like you can just tell he's somebody who is like relaxed and funny to interact with probably in real life. Whereas Sanderson comes off as like profoundly unfunny, as in like just really, really not funny. Like probably the kind of guy who like quotes a movie as like his sense of humor is quoting things and referencing things. That's the impression I get from his books. Um, and so that's a big thing to me is just the humor. Like Sanderson's humor never lands, and it comes off very effortless from Jordan. There's a big difference between them. But the biggest one, the one that I want to focus on the most, is that the Wheel of Time, and I didn't really appreciate this on my first reading of the series, and I do appreciate it a lot more now. Similar to like Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings is a creation myth. You have the Silmarillion, which is like you know the canonical like creation story of that world, and it draws deep from like allegory and Christianity and different religious traditions and stuff like that. And it shows that like Tolkien was like a scholar, right? Jordan with the Wheel of Time is doing his own creation myth, and it's pretty layered, it's pretty complex. There are elements of it like I mean I can critique the guy, right? But like there are elements of it that are come off as cartoonish at times. The some of the evil people are cartoonishly mustache twirling evil at times. But the creation myth itself is really cool. It does this idea of time as a cycle, a repeating cycle. That's the Wheel of Time. There's this notion that you have like the things that happen in the age before you are legendary legends, and then when the next age comes around those legends fade to myth, and by the time you go all the way around the wheel and you get back to right before the myth happens, like you've completely forgotten. The myth is just totally forgotten at that point. And then everything kind of happens again, um, but slightly different. And it's this infinite. It's a cool. It's just like a cool ontology, right? It's like somebody who appreciates creation mythology, religion, who's read stuff other than Reddit posts and Magic the Gathering flavor text and Dungeons and Dragons um, dungeon manuals or whatever they're called. Like it's somebody who's read real stuff, feeling and and has synthesized this into his own lived experience and said, "Here's a cool creation myth," and he spins it out and he tells a story set within it, and it you know very importantly, not only does he have a cool creation myth, but the plot and the characters are very deeply interwoven into that creation myth and advance the myth and tell you about the world he's created through the telling of the story. And it connects back to our world, which is very interesting, and specifically in the very like light-handed way that he does that. It's not there's not a big I feel that if Sanderson had done something like this, there would have been a big like celebratory reveal at some point where he's like, and here's all here. Let me point out all the little clues I left you, and then you'll get to feel smart when I point them out. Like Jordan never did that. It's like there were clues hidden in there, and people found them and posted them, but Jordan never like jerked himself off because he did them, right? He just so he created this whole creation myth, right? And then if you read like books 1 and 2 specifically, there is no autistic magic system in that story. Like Wheel of Time book 1 and 2, there is no autistic magic system. Book 3, it you start to see hints of it. But it's still not really an autistic magic system even in book 3. Um as the series goes on, some of that like hard magic that Sanderson talks about a lot starts showing itself. But what I would say in defense of this is that Jordan made his creation myth first. He created his myth, his world, his characters. He did all of that with no idea that he was going to make an autistic hard magic system. I don't think he planned that at all. And it's very clear if you reread book 1. It just he was just making stuff up as he went. um, and what happened, I think, is this world kind of fleshed out as he wrote the story, and he kind of thought to himself like, wouldn't it would be actually pretty cool if I like developed, like, it was kind of like he needed to advance the story in a way that continued to push this Wheel of Time myth, this this like ontology and mythology was deeply interwoven with the way magic worked in this world. And so in order this the whole plot of the story is like advancing this it the magic is so deeply interwoven to what's happening like in the actual plot, and specifically like characterization of several characters, that in order to advance that you have to build it up some. And then he probably at some point was just like, it's actually easier for me to just make this more like regular and consistent rather than just making it up as I go. And as he started to do that, it kind of just clicked, and he liked it, and it worked, right? But it was always, as I read, I realized that like it was always about the myth, the myth, the characters, the and how they relate to each other. And then that magic system was a symptom of that world that he created. Now, when the way I feel when I read a Sanderson story is that Sanderson says, if I were making, what would be a cool, badass type of magic system I could think of? What would be the power it would give you, and what would be the drawbacks? What would be the cost of that magic system? And then he kind of thinks of it like a video game almost, very like cut and dry. He I think he starts with the magic system before he does anything else. He makes up a magic system. Oh, okay. What if it's based on like metal? Different metals can do different things. You can push and pull on the metal. Oh, it would be cool. You could like flip coins around. Imagine like a guy with a trench coat flipping a coin. That would be cool. A guy with a fedora and a trench coat flipping a coin. That would be even cooler. Steampunk. Steampunk coin flipping, pushing off a coin. Like it's just like that's how I think he starts it, right? Like Jordan is like drawing on his like life's experience and fascination with mythology and religion and literature he's read and whatever else it might be. And then Sanderson's like, I was doing a D&D campaign with one of my buddies from my commander pod, and I he was like, my character can, like, that's like what he's thinking of when he thinks of these magic systems. It's just like, I don't know. I don't mean to hate on him too much, but there's just this like clear um lack of like new he just isn't approaching it from the right way. And his characters are afterthoughts, right? So you start with that nerd magic system. Then you think of some characters like, okay, this guy's wearing a trench coat and a fedora, and his name is Valeric, or what, like whatever he thinks sounds cool. And then he's like, and and wouldn't it be cool if there was like some badass armor that was tied into this magic system? And then you get this badass armor, and it makes you like you can like power up like in Dragon Ball Z or whatever. Like that's what it feels like, right? And then and then after he does all that, he's like, okay, and now what is like now that I've come up with this whole idea of like the coin metal and shit, what's the like in universe explanation for how this is? Oh, maybe I'll make it so there's like these like weird like mythical race or something that like powers the something something. Like he does it all backward, like from the way Jordan did it, I think. And it really sucks. Is like all I can really say about it. How long has this video been? 30 minutes. All right. I'll go like one thing I wanted to tie into this a little bit more is I feel also like there's a you know how Reddit works? Like, have you ever really looked at like what gets upvoted on Reddit on different subforums, I guess specifically? So there's a difference between like I'm not I'm very conflicted about algorithms for obvious reasons. Like as an author, algorithms were what allowed me to get a lot of money, and understanding those algorithms ahead of the curve was my main advantage as an author, which quite honestly sucks. Like that does suck, right? And then as I kind of lost, as I fell behind the curve on those algorithms, my books did worse. So that that's a very depressing way to look at things as an author, and it probably depresses you to hear that. But like, what I will say about algorithms is that they are way better than the alternative, I think. And one way you can really look at this is, and maybe other people disagree with me, but I feel that the algorithms on YouTube and Instagram are pretty good. Like, and I don't use Amazon enough, honestly, to know if they're good or not. But like YouTube, I use it all the time. I have YouTube Premium. I watch a lot of YouTube stuff, and my recommendations are just completely on point. They are just showing me stuff I want to see. There's almost like the perfect ratio of like things that I definitely want to see because I'm obviously watching it all the time. Channels I'm always watching. It just shows me when the new video's up that like just it just knows. I don't even have to check. I just know that like if this one video like from a channel I always watch is up, it's gonna show up there because it just is good. Um, and then the mixture of like, okay, but what if there's something I haven't seen ever, but maybe I want to watch it, that will show up with some frequency, and I'll be like, oh, that looks interesting, and I click it. And then if I watch it for a certain amount of time, pretty long maybe, then I'll see something else like that later, and I'll be like, oh, that looks cool too. And then it starts calibrating the algorithm maybe more toward that. I had a whole phase where I liked watching videos about people who died trying to climb mountains. I had like a little spurt of that, and like, and then I transitioned from that to watching videos about people who died diving into caves. And then after I kind of got bored of that and I stopped clicking them, and then they disappeared from my algorithm. But every I don't know, like every month or so there will be like a video pops up about people dying on mountains, and it's like, hey, do you want to hear about that again? And it's like if I click it, it will start showing up more. If I don't click it, it's like, okay, well, I'll come back, we'll check back in a month and see if you want to hear about people dying on mountains again. So I think those work really well. Instagram also, like, I find certain people really funny. Like I like certain types of Instagram skit formats or whatever, and the algorithms are pretty good at saying, okay, well, you like what about this one? What about this one? And it kind of builds up and is good. Now, obviously there are issues with this, right? Like the but I do feel, especially on YouTube, like it will recommend me people with like 32 views, and I'll look at it and go, oh, I want to watch that. Like, because it knows what I want to watch. And even though that channel only has 32 views, it knows that I specifically am likely to want to watch that. So I think it's not necessarily like just like, oh, well, I'm only going to show big channels to you. It doesn't do that. Um, Now, with, and I am going to bring in Sanderson to this, but like with Reddit, so Reddit has started to use algorithms as well. And there's a good reason for that. But the reason, so Reddit used to just like basically only show you by upvote, right? And think about, and Reddit still has a problem though. Like, yes, it has algorithms, but also it really, it's weighing the upvotes way too much compared to like anything else, because they just don't, that site doesn't have the infrastructure actually to figure out like what's worth showing you. Because the basically if something doesn't get upvoted enough, it doesn't, um it has no engagement, like no one's responding to it. So, but the problem, like if you think about on Reddit, like what gets upvoted on a subreddit, um what you end up with is this kind of like tyranny of the masses effect, I guess, where you have like the algorithm would be an example of like, I want the government, and I'm at this point already. Like we're not quite there, but I want the government to basically be an AI algorithm. If you look at what's happening, if you look at what is happening in the U.S. right now, and honestly, it's not just the U.S. Like you look pretty much anywhere, and it's like, yeah, well, this like let's just we need to get an AI algorithm plugged in that can just figure this stuff out, because like we can't handle this anymore. Um, but it's like the tyranny of the masses. Like you give a bunch of really stupid people the upvote button, and then watch what rises to the top, right? And so you have these like on Reddit, you'll notice like, I want to give some examples here. Any kind of like Reddit subreddit about reading, what ends up happening is there will be like, I don't know, like 10 go-to authors that are always the only recommendation that consistently can gain any real traction. They're kind of, you end up with this like very banal hive mind consensus agreement on certain things that are just not, they're not necessarily wrong or bad, but they're just like very generic and safe and boring. And you just, there's nothing to be gained from it. It's like you one of my pet examples on this is the author, Joe Abercrombie. Now, to be fair, I only read one of his series of books, and I read it many years ago, but it was really fucking bad. And I could go into detail of why it was really fucking bad, and I don't think I would change my mind if I read it again. It's quite possible he has newer work out that is better, that I might like. I'm not gonna just like write him off forever, but I read three of his books and they fucking sucked. And it was very Reddit. And I didn't know it was Reddit at the time. I just read it. Like, no, I'm not trying to make a pun here. I just read the books, and then later on, when I saw Reddit recommending them, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Um, but it's the kind of thing, like if you say bad stuff about Joe Abercrombie on most of those like fantasy subreddits, you will get downvoted. Like, um, you can't. There are certain like opinions you will just get downvoted, and then you're looking, you're like, oh well, I guess like all you can really do here is repeat the consensus opinion in order to have your post be visible, because if you don't repeat the consensus opinion, you will get downvoted, and then no one will ever see what you said. And it heavily incentivizes you just not to say that stuff, which results in only the consensus opinion ever existing. Um, and so an example, like another clear example of this is on most subreddits. Most subreddits are aggressively anti AI. You want, if you say something is AI slop, you get upvoted. If you bitch about AI stuff, if you post a mildly infuriating, you just post anything that was made by generative AI in mildly infuriating, go, this AI slop. I saw it at my school on the wall. People will upvote it. And then if you're on like a singularity or AI subreddit, that's not the case. But on almost any subreddit, like any anti AI sentiment will get upvoted, any pro AI thing will get downvoted. And so what I'm circling around to saying here is that I think Brandon Sanderson is basically what happens when you have an upvote button and you let the tyranny of the masses decide what is the best fantasy author. Um, and then you have like, this stupid, like his Patreons where you are they Patreon or no, Kickstarters. His Kickstarters where you can kickstart his book now and get a bunch of like Reddit tier blinged out hardcover tomes of his book before, like, that's not coming out for 3 years, but you can kickstart it and it makes millions of dollars. And this is the like non-algorithm, right? This is like just letting people upvote an author, and that's that kind of what you end up with is like Brandon Sanderson as the biggest fantasy author, and he's not really very good. But actually, another important factor here is that, to his credit, he's very consistent. Um, all of the critiques I have of him, I think, are very true. However, his stories are well structured. They, I think they're very bad, but like they are well structured. They have good like beats, right? The beats are good. The climaxes are have payoffs and stuff like that, and he finishes his series and he writes consistently, and that's something that for some reason 90% plus of authors are just completely incapable of doing, and that really does go a long way. um and that filtering effect where like you filter out the authors that can't do, like that can't finish stuff, you're not left with too many authors. But we have this publishing industry now of like the problem, I guess, is that the counter of what I'm saying is, okay, well, what happens when the algorithms decide? And then when the algorithms decide, you get romantasy and you get a lit RPG. So, it's kind of like, and then when you let the publishers decide, you get every character is queer for some reason. Like, not even if they're, because basically the gatekeeping of the publishing industry is like, if you say a character is queer, or if you say it's a queer story or a story about colonialism, or inspired by some kind of indigenous something or other, or person of color, or there's some gender element to it, if you just get that like into your blurb, you're like 10 times more likely to get published. So I've noticed this a lot. Like, a lot of authors are like, it's a queer space opera, and then you're like, you kind of look deeper and you're like, okay, so the protagonist is like bi. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, or in another example was like in N.K. Jemison's the first book in her series. There was like, and to be fair, like N.K. Jemison is black. She's a really good writer. Her prose is amazing. I thought that series was very good. I'm not like I'm not like one of those people who's just like, oh, it's you're being woke. Like she deserves, like, she's very good, right? Um, her world building was really cool. Like, I don't really have a lot negative to say about her. Um, but what she did do in that book was there was like a random trans woman character for no reason. It was like, one of those like it was, it was between two plot points when nothing was really happening. The like it was like the protagonist just randomly encountered a trans woman and like talked to her for just long enough that it didn't feel completely out of nowhere, and then she was gone. um and I feel like there's a lot of that happening in fantasy. So you've got like I don't really know what my thesis statement is here, other than that Brandon Sanderson really sucks. But yeah, I'll end it there. Thanks for watching. Bye.